1,400 years ago, when the world was immersed in darkness, the Quran was revealed, which brought light to a beleaguered world. And whereas the earlier books came with many scientific mistakes due to the hand of man having delved into them, the Quran had none of these contradictions. The world thought there could be no reconciliation between religion and science. But the Quran mentioned many scientific facts in great detail, like how a human being developed in the mother's womb, and described other scientific facts which amaze the world's renowned scientists and scientific community. Such was the impact of these revelations that the first Islamic medical conference was held at the Arab League building, Cairo, Egypt, on the 26th of September, 1985.
The Quran on Embryology. Dr. Keith Moore is the professor of anatomy and cell biology at the University of Toronto in Toronto, Canada. In 1984, he received the most distinguished award presented in the field of anatomy in Canada, the JCB Grant Award from the Canadian Association of Anatomists. Let's now listen to what Professor Keith Moore has to say about the revelations found in the Quran 1400 years ago.
As far as it is known from the history of embryology, little was known about the staging and classification of human embryos until the 20th century. For this reason, the descriptions of the human embryo in the Quran cannot be based on scientific knowledge in the 7th century. The only reasonable conclusion is that these descriptions were revealed to Muhammad from God. He could not have known such details because he was an illiterate man with absolutely no scientific training. The Mudga stage, Surah Al-Mu'minun, Ayah 1 to 14, and I repeated that before. Then we created the drop into a leech-like structure. Then of that leech-like structure, we made a chewed-like substance, which you can see here, and begins during the 6th week. Next stage is Al-Qissa Bil-Lan, Surah Al-Mu'minun, Ayah 14. Then we close the bones with flesh. So in the previous stage, then we had the bones, and then we covered the bones with flesh. So this Arabic term means a clothing with flesh, and after the bones form, they become surrounded or clothed by flesh or muscles, which acquire attachments to them. These muscle attachments permit movements of the skeleton to occur. This last ayah is Surah Abasa, ayah 19 and 20. From a drop he created him and immediately planned and programmed him. Then he makes his passage easy. This Arabic term means to make the passage easy. It is well known that as the time of birth approaches, the maternal tissues of the cervix and the joints of the pelvis become looser so that the passage of the fetus through the fetal canal will be facilitated. This process, initiated by hormones in the mother's blood, accelerates during the early stages of labor or delivery of the baby. As the amniochorionic sac, that is the bag of waters surrounding the baby, expands near the time of birth, it protrudes into the cervix, that is the neck of the uterus, and causes it to dilate. When the amniochorionic sac ruptures, the amniotic fluid provides a slippery pathway for the fetus to pass along the cervix and vagina to the outside of its mother. All the above occurrences facilitate the birth of the baby, that is, they make the passage easy. The stages of embryonic and fetal development mentioned in the Quran should be used when teaching Muslim students because they are in accordance with our modern understanding of the development before birth. It will also enable Muslim doctors and nurses to explain human development to their patients using Quranic references. Muhammad could not have known these facts about human development in the 7th century because most of them were not discovered until the 20th century. Muslims and others are justified in concluding that these facts could only have been revealed to Muhammad by the one who knows all about us, not only about how we developed, but how we live and function. Thank you very much.
The Quran on Embryology. Dr. E. Marshall Johnson. Dr. E. Marshall Johnson is Professor Emeritus of Anatomy and Developmental Biology at Thomas Jefferson University, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA. As you follow Dr. Marshall on this incredibly detailed journey, he leaves you in no doubt as to the only possible conclusion that can be made.
The two statements that I have are that, number one, Allah knows what every female womb bears and what is penetrating into the womb or decreasing and what is increasing. The second is none knows the future of what is decreasing or penetrating into the wombs except Allah. The two statements taken together can be considered the period of early embryogenesis from insemination to early implantation of the fertilized ovum. The key word in both is al-ghaid, which could mean passing through or penetration of fluid into depth, like water going into the depth of the earth. And two, decrease in amount. The two statements refer to something which is passing through the female reproductive tract, which is decreasing and or increasing in size, and it is something whose future at this stage is known to no one except Allah.
The Quran on Geology. Dr. Allison Pete Palmer. About our speaker, born and raised in New Jersey, AR, Pete Palmer earned his BS in geology from Pennsylvania State in 1946. Dr. Allison Pete Palmer will now take you on an historic passage through time, using the now recently obtained knowledge from geological sciences, which he verifies so wondrously using chosen verses from the Quran and clearly stated comments of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, known as Hadith.
What do the Quran and Hadith say about all of this? Some key words from various parts of the Quran and Hadith have interesting implications. According to Surah 29, Ayah 20, God says, "Walk through the earth and see how God did originate creation." The story that I have just presented is the product of thousands of geologists walking through the earth, observing and thinking about their observations, primarily since the early 1800s. Next slide. Surah 79, Ayah 31, discussing creation and the earth, states, "He draweth out therefrom its moisture." Although this seems to be in a context of springs because the following phrase mentions pastures, it is permissible to consider that this refers to outgassing of volcanoes early in Earth history. Volcanic gases include large amounts of water vapor and carbon dioxide. We believe that volcanoes early in Earth's history were the sources for the oceans and the atmosphere, an understanding only reached within the last century. Next slide. Surah 79, Ayah 32 states, also in the context of creation, "And the mountains hath he firmly fixed." Similar mention of mountains is found in several other surahs. It is permissible to interpret this to imply that mountains are rooted and that modern geophysics has established deep crustal roots for the axial parts of mountain systems at converging plate boundaries. Several surahs mention geological perceptions tied to earthquakes. Next slide. Surah 86, Ayah 12, in a context of predicting happenings on the Day of Judgment, states, "And by the earth which has faults." And Surah 67, Ayah 16, next slide, in a context of punishment for unbelievers, states, "Are you sure that God will not cause you to be swallowed up by the earth when it is turbulent?" It is permissible to interpret these surahs as evidence of the awareness of great faults within the earth and of a turbulent interior, parts of the recent developments in plate tectonics. Other surahs seem to refer to changing dimensions of continents. Next slide. in a context of creation. Surah 70, ayah 30 says, and the earth, here in the sense of continents, moreover, hath he expanded. Next slide. Surah 13, ayah 41, in a context referring to the power of God, states, see they not that we gradually reduce the continents? And in Surah 13, ayah 3, in the context of creation, we see, and it is he who expanded the earth and set thereon mountains standing firm and rivers. The concept of change in the geographic dimensions of the continents is a very modern concept. Perhaps the most intriguing thoughts are from a hadith in Sahih Muslim, where Muhammad states as one of the signs of the coming of the Day of Judgment, next slide, that Arab areas will return to being fertile and green and with rivers. The archaeological and geological evidence that they once were green and will become green again is less than a century old. I have been asked, could Muhammad personally have known these things? The answer of a cautious scientist is, it is not impossible, but it would require a very sophisticated awareness of natural history. We need research into the history of early Middle Eastern oral traditions to know whether, in fact, such historical events have been reported. If there is no such record, it strengthens the belief that God transmitted through Muhammad bits of his knowledge that we have only discovered for ourselves in recent times. We look forward to a continuing dialogue on the topic of science and the Quran in the context of geology. Thank you very much.
The Quran on Embryology. Dr. T.V.N. Persaud. Dr. T.V.N. Persaud is Professor of Anatomy, Professor of Pediatrics and Child Health, and Professor of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Let's now listen to what Dr. T.V.N. Persaud has to say on these amazing issues.
The growth of the fetus progresses rapidly until the beginning of the 12th week, after which it enters a new phase of rapid growth and dramatic changes. The rapid growth and dramatic changes which occur after the bones have been clothed by muscles have been mentioned in the Holy Quran 1400 years ago. And this is the Surah Al-Mu'minun, ayah 14. Sexual promiscuity, another area I like to briefly touch on, has long been associated with several venereal infections, in particular syphilis and gonorrhea. The risk of sexually acquired infection increases significantly with exposure to multiple sexual partners. Of great concern is the alarming increase in the incidence of diagnosed genital herpes because of sexual permissiveness. According to the United States Department of Health and Human Studies, which maintain very, very reliable statistics, maybe as many as 20 million individuals have genital herpes, and about 300,000 cases are expected annually. And each year, between 20,000 and 50,000 new cases of genital herpes are reported in Canada, where very reliable statistics are kept. Within the last 3 years, there has been an increasing number of reports on acquired immune deficiency syndrome, which you all know as AIDS, a disease of emerging epidemic proportion. It is attracting an extraordinary amount of attention. Some of you may know that it was featured in the August issue of Time magazine. Interest and concern on account of its unknown etiology and poor prognosis. There is no known cure for this illness too, which makes previously healthy adults become immunodeficient, and in most cases the victims will die. It is particularly prevalent among male homosexuals. But epidemiological trends indicate that it is slowly increasing among heterosexuals and will gradually spread to the general population. The consequences and dangers of promiscuous sexual relationships and deviant sexual practices have been expressed in this hadith some 1400 years ago. The lewdness will not exist among people until they appear as a common practice, and plagues and new disease which did not exist before will spread among them. The word lewdness encompasses adultery, fornication, I'm told, homosexuality, bestiality, and all other sexual perversions. And it is not wide-stretched of any imagination that we should not consider herpes and AIDS as clear examples of new diseases, and indeed at the present time new diseases for which we have no cure. Thank you very much.
The Quran on Scientific Fact and Discovery. Gerald C. Goldringer's PhD is in anatomy and cell biology. The final speaker from amongst these world-renowned scientists will now tell us, as all the others have, that the scientific knowledge that was only available to mankind in the last century or so is in complete harmony with the Quran.
Recent analysis of passages from the Quran reveals a description of human developmental stages from the earliest through and beyond organogenesis. No such distinctive and complete record of human development existed before the Quran. It was many centuries afterwards that the human developmental stages were recorded in traditional scientific literature. With the benefit of historical perspective and the accumulated wisdom of those who have gone before, we are in a position today not only to appreciate the remarkable contributions to science of these giants of the past, but just as importantly, we can better appreciate how much we still do not know about development. The advances of modern developmental biology raise as many questions as they solve, and the physicians and scientists of today are perhaps more than ever before in need of the wisdom and counsel of scholars and religious leaders. It is not surprising then that we relook to our holy scriptures for help and enlightenment. From what stuff hath he created him? From a sperm drop. He hath created him and then moldeth him in due proportions. Surah 80, Ayah 18 and 19. Thank you very much.
Quran and Science. And those to whom knowledge has come, see that the revelation sent down to you from your Lord, that is the truth, and that it guides to the path of the exalted in might, worthy of all praise. The Noble Quran, chapter 34, verse 6. The Quran calls people to worship only one God, the creator of everything. Say, He is Allah, the one and only. Allah, the Eternal, Absolute, He begets not, nor is He begotten, and there is none like unto Him. The Quran is a book of guidance and not a book of science. It is just a proof that it was revealed from the one Creator who knows everything about us. We will soon show them our signs in the universe and in their own souls, until it will become quite clear to them that it is the truth. Is it not sufficient as regards your Lord that He is a witness over all things? The Noble Quran, chapter 41, verses 53. The Quran mentioned many scientific facts, like the origin of the universe and how it came into existence. This included facts related to how it began and facts related to how it will end. Like the theory of the Big Bang, for example, and that everything came into existence after it, and our Earth was one of these structures that were formed from this Big Bang. Such kinds of theories were way beyond our reach 1400 years ago, and it is only now that science has begun to unravel some of the facts surrounding the creation of the universe. However, the Quran mentioned that our earth was part of the skies and then became separated from it. Allah says in the Quran, "Have not those who disbelieve known that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one united piece? Then we parted them, and we have made from water every living thing. Will they not then believe?" The Noble Quran, chapter 21, verse 30. And the Quran mentioned that our space is expanding. That's because after the Big Bang, every planet and star is moving away from each other. Allah says in the Quran, "With power did we construct the heaven. Verily, we are able to extend the vastness of space thereof." The Noble Quran, chapter 51, verses 47. And the Quran mentioned that all the planets are running in an orbit, and the sun is running to its resting place. That resting place is the translation of the Arabic word mustaqar, which indicates an exact appointed place and fixed time. According to modern astronomy, the solar system is indeed moving in space at a rate of 12 miles per second towards a point situated in the constellation of Hercules Alpha Lyrae, whose exact location has been precisely calculated. Astronomers have named that mustaqar the solar apex. Allah says in the Quran, "And the sun runs on its fixed course for a term appointed." That is the decree of the Almighty, the All-Knowing. The Noble Quran, chapter 36, verses 38. And that our universe will end by rolling together like sheets or records. Allah says in the Quran, "And remember the day when we shall roll up the heavens like a scroll rolled up for books. As we began the first creation, we shall repeat it. It is a promise binding upon us. Truly, we shall do it." The Noble Quran, chapter 21, verses 104. And the last scientific fact we want to present to you is regarding the fingertips of the human being. The Quran mentioned that every human has a unique fingerprint, and it is used as a very important method of identification around the world. But what is even more amazing is this feature of the fingerprint was only discovered in the late 19th century. Before then, people regarded the fingerprints as ordinary codes without any specific importance or meaning. However, in the Quran, God points to the fingertips, which did not attract anyone's attention at that time, and He drew our attention to this important matter, which has now only been understood in our age. Allah says in the Quran, "Does man, a disbeliever, think that we shall not assemble his bones? Yes, we are able to put together in perfect order the tips of his fingers." The Noble Quran, chapter 75, verses 3 and 4. There are still many scientific facts in the Quran for any knowledgeable individual or scientist to explore, like it says in the Quran, "And those to whom knowledge has come, see that the revelation sent down to thee from thy Lord, that is the truth, and that it guides to the path of the exalted in might, worthy of all praise." The Noble Quran, chapter 34, verses 6.